Good morning, everyone. Today's reading will be taken from the book of Luke, chapter 14, from verse 5 to 8. And it says, And the devil took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, and said to him, To you I will give all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. If you, then, will worship me, it will all be yours. And Jesus answered and said, It is written, You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.
Good morning to all. We've been looking at how to fight temptations that the devil uses to attack us. And the best way to see how he attacks us is to take a look at how he attacks Jesus. So this is the final temptation, for now at least. It's certainly the final one that we're going to be looking at. And the reason why I wanted to look at this is that I see so many similarities between the temptations and trials that come in my own life and those that come in Jesus. And I know that everybody sitting here in this room feels the same way. Here we have an interesting tile painting. We'll be taking a look a little bit at this a little later on, but you can see that it more or less tells the story. And so people who are familiar with the story can take a look at that and they can say, oh yes, there's Jesus and there's the devil and he's offering him all that he can see. But it's a little bit flat. It's two-dimensional. It's not three-dimensional. It does its point. It teaches a lesson. But in order to understand fully the significance of the temptation that Jesus faced and to see how it applies in our own life, we have to dig a little bit more deeply. And that's what I want to do this morning. And you may have noticed in your own life that temptations come one after the other. Some older people I know have said frequently, it's sort of a superstition saying, troubles always come in threes. And you may have heard that as well. Or there's another saying we have, it never rains, but it pours. And that certainly is the case for Jesus. And so that's an encouragement to me, myself. When something happens, I say, all right, I'll deal with this next. And then sure enough, something else comes along next. But Jesus is facing it even worse than we are. And I'm going to point that out this morning to you. Now, the first thing that we have to remember is that Jesus is starving. He's been fasting for 40 days. He's in the wilderness. He's not in familiar surroundings. And sometimes we take a little bit of comfort when we are in familiar surroundings, or at least we can snack on something, but he's got that against him. And it is when he is weak that Satan comes to him. And I want you to remember, it is when you are weak that Satan comes and attacks us. Being Canadians, we're familiar with wolves. The wolf pack attacks the weakest animal. They are looking around, they're scouting. They don't want to go for that healthy animal. They'll go for the elderly, they'll go for the juvenile, they'll go for the weakened one. And it is when we are weak that Satan attacks us. And it is when Jesus is weak, or Satan assumes that he's weak, that he attacks Jesus as well. And doubt is the number one strategy that the devil uses. He wants Jesus to doubt who he is, if you are the Son of God. He wants us to doubt who we are. Are we children of God or are we not? And the first temptation was doubting the provision of God. If God does provide, why are you hungry? Go ahead and do it. Work for yourself. And we've seen that temptation in our own life. Go out and do what you have to do. Second temptation is to doubt the protection of God. Does God really love you? And he wants Jesus to set up a test. Leap off this temple. And Jesus says, no, you don't tempt God. So he's got these two various temptations. And the third punch, he's got the 1, 2. Now the third punch is this one. He takes him to the mountain peaks look at it, all these rules and authorities and principalities and dominions, and I can give them to you. And our initial reaction when we just kind of flip over this, we just treat it like a two-dimensional picture is, well, of course, Jesus is not going to worship the devil. Why would he do that? But we have to understand that this is a very real test. This is not like on a hot day, somebody says, oh, I'd give $1 million for a cup of water. Or if you like Shakespeare, Richard III, a horse, my kingdom for a horse. No, it's not this at all. This is a very real offer made to Jesus. And it's not mentioned in Matthew 4, but it's mentioned in Luke 4, which is why I had it read to us this morning, where Satan says, I have the authority to give you these things, which is somewhat frightening for us today in our own political atmosphere, or looking all the way back throughout history. We see this fight, this constant struggle. Are God's leaders in control of the nation? When the leader is righteous, the nation prospers. When the leaders are wicked, then that brings about the downfall of the nation. And if we look at the Old Testament, we see that Judah frequently had good kings and they prospered, but they also had evil kings. On the other hand, the northern kingdom, Israel, it had terrible leaders all along. Even when, say, Jeroboam was appointed by God, here, I'm going to let you rule. But he still blew it because he followed his own desires. Saul, anointed by Samuel, he's the first king, and then he's led astray. So it's frightening, but it's interesting to notice that Satan does have this ability to put rulers into various positions of authority. But why does he do this to Jesus? Why the offer to Jesus? Well, in order to understand this, we have to go three-dimensional. Don't just look at the flat painting here. We have to understand the purpose and the work of the Christ. And if we understand that, we'll understand why it is such a temptation, and we'll see how it applies to us. Now, first of all, we have to go back to the beginning. Genesis. Eve is told, there will be one of your offspring, and he will crush the head of the devil. He will crush his head. But in doing it, his heel will be bruised. So there is going to be a fight, and it's not going to be a one-sided victory. And then we take a look at some of the messianic psalms written by David about his future descendant who would someday rule. And particularly Psalm 22, very grisly, very gruesome. And you can see how it applies to Jesus on the cross. His enemies round about, calling out at him, his bones sticking out. But I think the greatest example of that is found in Isaiah 53, where it goes in depth about the suffering servant. And success comes to this servant only after the Lord crushes him. This is going to happen. And Jesus knew that it was going to happen. And he was a man. Sure, he's God, but he's also man. I would not like to know when I'm going to die, nor how I am going to die. I don't want to know that. But Jesus knew that. He had to carry that. And even when we go back to the very early time with Nicodemus in John 3, he says to Nicodemus at night, I'm going to be lifted up just as Moses lifted up that snake. And that only meant one thing, crucifixion in those days. It flies over our head because we're not familiar with crucifixion at all. And in John 12, when he's talking to the people in the temple, he's saying that the Son of Man must be lifted up. And they rebelled against that idea. That's impossible. Messiah is going to be with us forever. That will not happen. But Paul said that it had to happen and that Jesus knew it was going to happen. And he came and he was willing to humble himself to the point of death. And then Paul throws us in even death on a cross, which again is something that we forget because we don't go around crucifying people. So the point is that Christ will receive glory, dominion, rule, and honor. That is promised. That is going to happen after he suffers, after he sacrifices his life. So understanding that, I think that helps us to understand this temptation. What is the temptation? The devil is offering Jesus the opportunity to avoid the suffering. Yes, you're going to get honor, and yes, these kingdoms might be yours, but why do you want to suffer? I can give you a shortcut. You can avoid the sacrifice. You can avoid the humiliation. Just take it. I'm offering it to you right here and now. Don't go through the pain. And why wait? Why wait those 3 years or however long it will be? Take the shortcut to glory. If you worship the devil, if you worship me, you can have it right away. So, what is this here? It's a temptation to take a shortcut, to achieve our own desires, to not have to listen to God, to not listen to the path that we must follow. And we humans love shortcuts. Look on the computer and there's always a hack to do this or a hack to do that. You may have heard the saying, there are two ways to do something. You can do it the easy way or you can do it the right way. And Jesus is going to do it the right way. Now, this temptation is not just at this one time. In the passage read from Luke, it says at the end that the devil went away until a more opportune time. So this is not just a one-time opportunity for Jesus to avoid the suffering. If you will remember, the most scathing rebuke that Jesus gave was to his disciple, his apostle, Peter. Because Peter, when Jesus is telling him, I'm going to have to suffer, Peter says, no, you don't have to suffer, Lord. You don't have to. And Jesus responds, get behind me, Satan. So that temptation to take the shortcut is still there. It wasn't just here that the devil provokes Jesus. And again, think, we are humans. Do you want to really go through that awful pain, through that grisly death? No. You can avoid it, Jesus. You can avoid it. Well, how does Jesus respond? He responds the way he did in the first two temptations by going back to the scriptures. Deuteronomy 6, which was a call for Israel to live for God. And he says to him, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. Pretty basic, pretty plain. And Jesus is going to stick to that, and he's going to stick with that. He will listen to the Father. He will not seek his own way. He will not take the easy way, the shortcut. He will endure that suffering. He will endure that humiliation. He will sacrifice himself. Worshiping God alone means you listen to him, you obey him, and you don't listen to your own desires. And that's where the temptation comes in. So the test, the devil is constantly enticing us humans to take the shortcuts, find the easy way. But in his answer to Satan, Jesus teaches us that the answer is not to take the shortcut. Because when you take the shortcut, you are no longer worshiping God. You are worshiping Satan. And really, when you think about it, all sins are shortcuts. All of them. Sexual immorality, it's bypassing God's goal and plan to have the relationship of two people, a permanent relationship with one another. Revenge, that's a shortcut. You don't want to wait on the justice of God. You want to take it into your own hands. Drugs, drunkenness, it's a shortcut to get through the pain or the agony or whatever situation there is. Strife, enmity, jealousy, envy. What are these? They're a shortcut. They're a manipulative way for you to get somebody else to work your will. You want your will, so you're going to use these on other people. All of these shortcuts are sin. And the problem with us, particularly in our culture, we want to serve the Lord, but we want to do it without the sacrifice. We don't want to suffer. We've been programmed this way. Advertisement, through school, through parents, through just being around other people. We don't like to suffer. We don't like pain. And Jesus knew this, and Jesus felt this as well. He didn't enjoy pain, but he knew that the path through life is going to be one of suffering and sacrifice. And he also knows He knew it and he knows it today, that this is our difficulty. He can understand us because he was humans. We don't like the pain. And he says in an encouraging way to his followers, you're going to have to deny yourself and you're going to have to take up your cross and follow me. And when he said that, for those people, that was very real because they saw people crucified. They saw good people and bad people who were crucified. And that would become a reality for some of them. Again, those wicked, evil rulers. There's Herod. There was Nero, Domitian. Christians have suffered and they have always suffered. And yet they endure, they hang on because Jesus encourages us to do that. Paul in Romans 8 says that we are heirs of God. You Christians in Rome, and this is when Nero is reigning. He hasn't gone crazy yet. You are heirs with God and co-heirs with Christ, if in fact we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. Christ achieved the glory, and we will achieve the glory. Do you trust the promise of God? Jesus did, and he was willing to hang on. But there is going to be suffering first. However, we like to think that we don't have to deny anything to ourselves. We don't want to deny things to ourselves. We want to think we shouldn't have to do it. We want to get it without sacrifice and without suffering. That's why there are all these hacks on the computer. Do this the easy way. But Jesus shows us in his answer and in his life that the only way to glory is to say no to your sinful desires, no to sinful ways, and seek the will of God, to worship God and not our desires. Because if we look after our desires, we're worshiping Satan. We must trust God. So this final temptation is getting Jesus to doubt the promises of God. Can God really fulfill them? Philippians 3 is a little bit of a spooky passage that sometimes we overlook and we don't catch it. Brothers and sisters, Paul says, and Paul is in prison at the time. Remember that. Join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example you have in us. Does this mean they're going to be in prison? Possibly. Does this mean that the authorities are going to clamp down on them? Possibly. And he says, join in imitating me. And of course, Paul always said, I'm imitating Christ. Imitate Christ. For many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. I've often told you of them, and now I will tell you even with tears. Their end is destruction. Their God is the belly. Their glory is in their shame. Their minds are set on earthly things. He doesn't say there are enemies of Christ, which is true. There are enemies of Christ, outright enemies of Christ, and that's why Paul is imprisoned. But he said there are people who live as enemies of the cross of Christ. What is he talking about? He's talking about Christians. Enemies of what? The cross. Enemies of suffering. They don't want to suffer. We don't want to suffer. What is their God? Well, they might say it's the Lord, but it's actually Satan. Their God is their belly. Their glory is in their shame, their shameful desires. Their minds are set on earthly things. Have we forgotten where we're going? Heaven is our home, not earth. And then he says in verse 20, but our citizenship is in heaven, and it is from there that we are expecting a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. This is the promise. Jesus fulfilled his path. He died for us. He sacrificed for us. And this is the promise that he extends to us. Do you believe it? Don't be enemies of the cross. So the victory does come. The victory does come to Jesus. And we see that angels come and they feed him and they comfort him. He's got victory for a while. And where does that victory come from? In trusting God's promises. Devil wants us to doubt God's will. He wants us to doubt the care that God has. He wants to doubt that God can give us what we need. He wants us to doubt that God will deliver on his promises for future glory. Don't be misled by this doubt that he tries to stir up and plant in your mind. But as we look back, we see that Jesus was given the authority. He was given honor, and it came through submitting to God's will. And we are going to trust that God will keep his promises to us. We've got to do that. And if we don't, we will falter. The Hebrew writer writes to Christians at a time of intense persecution. And some of them are thinking, maybe we should go back to Judaism. It was easier there because our fellow Jews are after us. What do they have that we don't have? Well, they have the law of Moses, and maybe there's comfort in that. And he says in Hebrews 11, consider those who have died before us, those men of faith. They desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them. And then he says that these people could have gone back to their homelands. Abraham, he could have gone back where he wanted. Isaac, he goes through all of them. They can go back. And you, Hebrew Christians, you can go back to the old way. You can go back to your ways of Judaism. But if you do, you're going to miss out on this promise that God has given to us. He proclaims that if we look to fulfill our desires now, we're going back to slavery. People of faith don't look back, however. They look forward. And Paul was a good one for that. And he said that I don't look behind me. I let all of that go behind me, and I look forward and I strive to achieve the goal. I am in a race, and I'm going to focus on that end, and I'm going to make it there. We're citizens of heaven. The devil, however, wants us to doubt that. He wants us to doubt God's promises, which are even better than we can imagine. We can imagine an event or imagine going to a place, and when you get there, what is it like when you get there and it's better than you even expected? That is what it is going to be like for us. That is what it is going to be like for the Christian who hangs on. So the question this morning, do you understand where you're going? I vaguely know, but I don't fully understand. We won't understand until we actually get there. God gives us his promises, and he wants us to believe those promises and that he can fulfill them for us. When God made a promise to Abraham, because he had no one greater by whom to swear, he swore by himself. In the same way, when God desired to show even more clearly to the heirs of the promise the unchangeable character of his purpose, he guaranteed it by an oath, so that through two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible that God would prove false, we who have taken refuge might be strongly encouraged to seize the hope set before us. So we have a hope. Christians have a hope. Verse 19, we have this hope, a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain. Do you understand what an anchor is? If you've been fishing, maybe you do. You don't have an anchor, that boat just kind of drifts around the lake. My father's ship would come in, it would anchor or maybe moor itself to the dock, and it would stay there. We have a cable that takes us and connects us to God. He's given us promises and he will fulfill them. He took an oath. We think that people in the court, when they take an oath, well, that's going to be the truth. But God is greater than that. He's not going to be false in the first place. So we do fight doubts. We fight temptations of the devil. But we can only be successful if we hold on to the promises of God. Remember, Jesus elsewhere said that the devil is a liar. He lies all the time. That's his nature. So why would you listen to what the devil is putting forward to you when you have those promises of God? A God who does not lie, a God who is willing to take an oath. We have strong encouragement to follow Jesus and to hang on. He was successful and he was rewarded. Getting this heavenly food was not the end, however. He went on further. He suffered. He sacrificed himself. And we will never know that true rest not until we make it to the other side. And that's what we look forward to. Reunification with Christ our Lord.